What hurts more than a blade to the chest? A knife to the back from the one person you would have taken a bullet for. Imagine discovering that your absolute closest confidant, the man you called a brother, has been secretly plotting to marry your sister behind your back. And you don't even hear it from him. You find out from your worst enemy. Welcome to a world where loyalty is a luxury no one can afford, and the grandest mansions hide the ugliest secrets. Tonight, we are diving deep into a thrilling tale of shattered trust, hidden agendas, and a comatose billionaire whose bedside becomes a hunting ground for vultures. Stick around because a single fallen pillow is about to expose a potential killer. The confrontation begins in a room thick with suffocating tension. A young woman stands before an intensely defensive young man, her eyes burning with a mix of hurt and disbelief. She demands to know if his resentment runs so deep that it's completely consuming him, keeping him awake at night. She reminds him of how fiercely she defended him and his companion against everyone else, insisting to the family that they had no malicious intentions. Yet despite her loyalty, he stands there, cold and unyielding, unable to find it in his heart to forgive her. He tries to dismiss her pain, coldly stating that this chaotic, dangerous world has absolutely nothing to do with her. But she refuses to let him off that easily. The real breaking point hits when he clears his throat, struggling to contain an avalanche of raw emotional devastation. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from his absolute best friend, a man he considered a true brother. He had trusted this man with his life and, more importantly, with his family. He had handed over the protection of his innocent sister, explicitly asking him to treat her as his own blood. Instead, that trust was completely trampled. His so-called brother went behind his back to arrange a secret marriage, and the news was delivered like a slap in the face by a scheming matriarch. For a man who values family honor above all else, this is a fatal blow. If you can't trust the brother you share your bread with, who can you trust? Desperate to de-escalate the rising fury, the young woman begs him to understand. She argues that love isn't a crime, suggesting that his friend hid the truth simply because he was terrified of this exact explosive reaction. Fear makes people do desperate things. She even uncovers her own scars to prove her point, confessing that she also hid her past relationships out of a paralyzing fear of losing him. She pleads with him to show the same grace to his friend that she is asking for herself, but his heart has already turned to stone. He scoffs at the idea of his friend being afraid, declaring that the man fears absolutely nothing. In a rare moment of vulnerability, the angry young man reflects on his own brutal past. He reveals that he grew up utterly fearless, unshaken by his father's deafening rants, his older brother's violent outbursts, or his mother's ruthless scoldings. He used to speak his mind, knowing a brutal beating awaited him for doing so. But now, for the first time in his life, he is terrified, and the reason is standing right in front of him. Ever since the day he met her, the terrifying prospect of losing her has held his soul hostage. Stunned, she asks if she is the one inspiring such fear. That's when his deepest, most buried trauma spills out. He paints a heartbreaking picture of his childhood. While the rest of the wealthy family sat at a lavish dining table, he wasn't even allowed a single chair next to the servants. He ate his meals in pitch-black isolation, watched the sun rise alone, and bore his heaviest griefs without a single soul to lean on. A man with nothing to lose fears nothing. But now her presence changes everything. Loving her has forced him to learn the agonizing art of silence, to bow his head, and to compromise, all because the thought of a life without her is too much to bear. The young woman seizes this confession, gently suggesting that his friend might be paralyzed by that exact same fear of abandonment. She urges him to swallow his pride, look his friend in the eye, and have a real conversation. She begs him to stay calm and not judge, because the human heart knows no judge. But his chilling response closes the door on any hope of reconciliation. It is already far too late. The secret wedding plans have set an irreversible catastrophe in motion. Meanwhile, in a quiet, shadowy wing of the grand estate, a completely different tragedy unfolds. A grieving young woman sits by the bedside of her comatose father. Gripping his frail hand, she tries to anchor herself to reality, whispering that he is finally safe at home. She desperately clings to the hope that he will awaken when the time is right, but the exhaustion in her voice is undeniable. This man was a titan who stood tall through unimaginable storms. He survived the agonizing loss of a son, discovered a hidden heir, and bore the weight of his eldest daughter's severe trauma. As she begs her weary father to take his hard-earned rest, a far more sinister plot is brewing right outside the door. Downstairs, the atmosphere shifts from tragic grief to toxic ambition. A fiercely ambitious young woman who once fantasized about marrying into this wealthy dynasty as a proud bride has been reduced to a glorified maid, scrubbing floors and wiping down counters. Bitter and humiliated, she curses her cruel fate. The family's manipulative aunt approaches her, coldly reminding her of her low status and warning her not to cause any trouble before her paperwork is even processed. The maid tries to play along, asking if the aunt has fulfilled her end of the bargain, specifically, introducing her to elite film producers and directors who can launch her acting career. But the mask quickly slips. The maid boldly calls out the aunt's true, malicious motive. She was brought into this house as a pawn solely to torment the young lovers and drive them out of the estate. The aunt doesn't even deny it, sadistically admitting that the maid's mere presence in the house is a psychological weapon designed to tear the couple apart. With a dismissive command to fetch an air purifier for her bedroom, the aunt leaves her pawn to simmer in her own rage. The tension reaches a dangerous climax back in the comatose patriarch's bedroom. An opportunistic, hostile male relative slips into the room, standing over the helpless old man with a heavy pillow clutched tightly in his hands. Just as he hovers over the bed, the young woman walks in, freezing in absolute horror. Caught red-handed, the intruder quickly spins a frantic lie, claiming the pillow had simply fallen to the floor and he was merely replacing it to prevent an infection. He mocks the old man's vegetative state, callously wondering if he will wake up today, in 5 years, or perhaps a decade from now. When the young woman demands he leave, the intruder's fake smile vanishes. He viciously brings up their bloody history, reminding her of the brutal blood feud and the countless relatives this comatose man allegedly ordered killed. He barks that an ancient war doesn't simply vanish just because someone says it's over. Before the confrontation turns violent, the manipulative aunt storms in, outraged to find this unwanted relative invading her private quarters. The intruder tries to laugh it off with a sick, twisted joke, but the air in the room remains freezing cold. In a house where a pillow can be used as a murder weapon and a friend can turn into a Judas overnight, everyone is living on borrowed time.